in the fog-shrouded streets of Victorian London, a bizarre advertisement lures red-headed pawnbroker Jabez Wilson into a strange scheme, copying the Encyclopedia Britannica for a mysterious red-headed league. But when the league vanishes, Sherlock Holmes uncovers a cunning plot led by the brilliant criminal John Clay. From a quiet pawnshop to a hidden tunnel beneath a bank's gold-filled vault, Holmes races against time to thwart a daring heist. Will his genius unravel the deception before the thieves strike? Dive into a tale of wit, treachery, and deduction. Chapter 1. The singular advertisement tit was a chill morning in the autumn of 1889, and I, Dr. John H. Watson, found myself once again ensconced in the familiar quarters of 2-1 Baker Street. The fire crackled in the grate, casting a warm glow. Across the cluttered room, where papers, chemical apparatus, and the remnants of Sherlock Holmes's latest experiments vied for space, Holmes himself lounged in his velvet-lined armchair, his long, lean frame draped with a dressing gown, his hawk-like features half obscured by a haze of tobacco smoke. His violin lay neglected upon the table, and in his hands he held a copy of the Daily Telegraph, its pages rustling as his keen eyes darted across the print. "Watson," said he, without lifting his gaze, "have you ever considered the extraordinary lengths to which men will go when spurred by greed or curiosity? The human mind, so predictable in its frailties, yet so inventive in its follies." I looked up from my breakfast, a plate of kedgeree cooling before me, and frowned. "I suppose so, Holmes," I replied, accustomed to his cryptic pronouncements. "But what prompts such a reflection today?" He tossed the newspaper onto the table with a flick of his wrist, pointing to a small advertisement circled in red ink. "Read this," he said, his voice tinged with that peculiar excitement which betokened his interest in some new puzzle. I took up the paper, my curiosity piqued, and read aloud the following notice, printed in the cramped, unassuming type of the agony column: "To the Red-Headed League, by the bequest of the late Ezekiah Hopkins, of Lebanon, Pennsylvania, USA. A vacancy is now open, which entitles a member of the League to a salary of £4 a week for purely nominal services. All red-headed men, sound in body and mind, and above the age of 21 years, are eligible. Apply in person on Monday at 11 o'clock to Duncan Ross at the offices of the League, 7 Pope's Court, Fleet Street." I lowered the paper, my brow furrowed. "What an extraordinary announcement," I exclaimed. "What in heaven's name is the Red-Headed League? And this Ezekiah Hopkins some American eccentric, no doubt." Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his grey eyes gleaming with amusement. "Precisely, Watson. The absurdity of it is what makes it so compelling. A league for red-headed men, a bequest from a transatlantic philanthropist. It is either the work of a madman or a scheme of singular cunning. I incline toward the latter." I stared at him, still grasping the newspaper. But what could be the purpose of such a bizarre advertisement? Surely it is some jest, or at best a publicity stunt. Holmes's lips twitched into a faint smile. A jest, perhaps, but one with a purpose. The very specificity of the requirements red-headed men, sound in body and mind, suggests a design. And the promise of £4 a week for nominal services is calculated to attract a certain type of applicant. No, Watson, this is no mere prank. There is mischief afoot, and I mean to unravel it. I set the paper down, my appetite forgotten. "You intend to investigate, then?" "Indeed," said he, rising with that sudden energy which transformed him from languor to action. But first, we must observe the scene of this peculiar enterprise. The advertisement specifies Monday at 11. That gives us 2 days to prepare. I shall make inquiries about this Ezekiah Hopkins and his so-called league. In the meantime, Watson, I suggest you keep your revolver oiled and your hat at the ready. We may have need of both. The remainder of that day passed in a flurry of activity. Holmes dispatched telegrams, consulted his vast index of criminal records, and vanished into the city for hours, returning with a gleam in his eye and a cryptic remark about the ingenuity of the human mind. I, meanwhile, busied myself with my practice, though my thoughts strayed constantly to the mystery of the red-headed league. What could be the object of such an outlandish scheme? Was it, as Holmes suspected, a cover for some nefarious purpose, or merely the whim of a wealthy eccentric? The more I pondered, the more impenetrable the puzzle seemed. On Sunday evening, Holmes returned from one of his excursions, his face alight with that suppressed excitement which I had come to associate. With a breakthrough, he flung himself into his chair, lit a pipe, and fixed me with a penetrating stare. "Watson," said he, "I have made inquiries. Ezekiah Hopkins, it seems, is a name known only to the readers of this advertisement. No record exists of such. A man in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, or indeed anywhere else. The American consulate has no knowledge of him, and my contacts in the shipping trade confirm that no bequest of such a nature has crossed the Atlantic in recent years." "Then the League is a fiction?" I asked. "Not necessarily," said Holmes. "The advertisement is real, the office at Pope's Court exists, and the promise of £4 a week is likely to draw a crowd. But the absence of Hopkins suggests a fabrication, and a fabrication implies intent. We shall see what Monday brings." The following morning dawned grey and damp, with a fine drizzle that coated the streets in a sheen of moisture. Holmes, clad in a long ulster and a deep, was in high spirits, his lean frame vibrating with anticipation. "Come, Watson," he said, as we finished our coffee. "The game is afoot. Let us see what manner of men this league attracts, and what lies behind this singular advertisement." We took a hansom to Fleet Street, where the bustle of the city was already in full swing. Newsboys shouted their wares, omnibuses rumbled past, and the air was thick with the scent of wet pavement and coal smoke. Pope's Court, a narrow alleyway tucked behind the thoroughfare, was a stark contrast to the lively street. Its cobbles were slick with rain, and a single gas lamp cast a feeble glow upon the grimy walls. At its far end stood a nondescript door, above which a brass plate announced, in faded letters, "The Red-Headed League." To our astonishment, the alley was thronged with men, their heads ablaze with every shade of red hair imaginable: fiery auburn, deep russet, pale ginger, and hues that defied description. They jostled and muttered, their faces a mixture of hope, suspicion, and bewilderment. Some were well-dressed, others in threadbare coats. Some were young, others bent with age, but all shared the common trait of their vivid hair, which glowed like beacons in the dim light of the court. "Good heavens, Holmes," I exclaimed. "There must be 100 of them." "More, I should wager," said he, his eyes scanning the crowd. "Observe, Watson, the diversity of class and character. Here is a clerk, there a labourer, and yonder a gentleman of means. Yet all are drawn by the same law. It is a masterstroke of psychology." As we approached, a stout, florid-faced man, with a shock of crimson hair, pushed through the throng, his expression one of mingled excitement and exasperation. He carried a walking stick, which he brandished to clear his path, and his small, shrewd eyes darted about as if seeking an escape from the chaos. Holmes stepped forward, his manner courteous but firm. "Pardon me, sir," said he, "but are you applying for the vacancy with the Red-Headed League?" The man turned, his face flushing an even deeper shade of red. "I am, sir, and it's a deuced nuisance. This crowd." Jabez Wilson, pawnbroker of Saxe-Coburg Square. "And who might you be?" "Sherlock Holmes, consulting detective," said my friend, with a slight bow. "This is my associate, Dr. Watson. We are intrigued by this league and its curious advertisement. Might we have a moment of your time?" Wilson hesitated, his piggy eyes narrowing. "I've no time for idle chatter, Mr. Holmes. I've a business to run, and this league business has already cost me a morning's trade. But if you're a detective, perhaps you can make sense of this madness." Holmes's smile was disarming. "I assure you, Mr. Wilson, my interest is purely professional. Let us adjourn to a quieter spot, a coffee house, perhaps where you may tell us your story." Wilson, though grumbling, consented, and we made our way to a small establishment on Fleet Street, where the clatter of cups and the hum of conversation provided a welcome contrast to the chaos of Pope's Court over steaming mugs of coffee. Wilson unfolded his tale, his voice a curious blend of indignation and pride. He was a widower, he said, of some 50 years, with a modest pawnbroking business in Saxe-Coburg Square, a quiet corner of London. His trade was steady, if unremarkable, and he employed a single assistant, a young man named Vincent Spaulding, who had come to him some months prior seeking work. Spaulding was a sharp, eager fellow, with a quick mind and a passion for photography, which he pursued in his spare time in the shop's cellar. He worked for half wages, a boon to Wilson's frugal nature, and had proven himself reliable, if occasionally distracted by his hobby. "About 2 months ago," said Wilson, warming to his narrative, "Vincent comes to me with this very advertisement. 'Look here, Mr. Wilson,' says he, 'this is made for you. Your hair's as red as a furnace, and £4 a week for doing next to nothing. You'd be a fool to miss it.' Well, sir, I'm not one for vanity, but my hair is a fine shade, and the money was tempting, so I agreed to apply." He went on to describe his visit to Pope's Court the previous week, when the alley had been even more crowded than today. After a long wait, he was admitted to a small, sparsely furnished office, where a man introducing himself as Duncan Ross received him. Ross, a wiry, red-faced individual with a brusque manner, had examined Wilson's hair with a magnifying glass, declaring it the finest specimen of its kind in all London. To Wilson's astonishment, he was hired on the spot, with instructions to return the following Monday to begin his duties. "And what are those duties?" asked Holmes, his eyes narrowing. Wilson scratched his head. "That's the queer part, Mr. Holmes. I'm to copy the Encyclopedia Britannica by hand, 4 hours a day, in their office. They've a set of volumes there, and I'm to start with the letter A, and work my way through. £1 for a week, they say, and no questions asked. It's odd, but I've no complaint about the pay." Holmes leaned forward, his expression intent. "And your assistant, he accompany you to these sessions?" "No, sir," said Wilson. "He minds the shop while I'm gone. Can't leave it unattended, you know. Though he's keen as mustard about the league says. It's a rare opportunity." Holmes exchanged a glance with me, his eyes alight with that peculiar intensity which I knew signaled assent. "Tell me, Mr. Wilson," said he, "what do you know of this Duncan Ross?" "Nothing, save that he's the league's agent, A sharp fellow, but civil enough. Said the League was founded by Hopkins to aid red-headed men, though why he cared for such a thing, I can't imagine. Holmes's fingers drummed upon the table. And the office itself, what was it like? Plain as you please, said Wilson. A desk, a chair, the encyclopedia, and a window looking onto the court. Nothing fancy, but clean and tidy. Holmes nodded, as if filing each detail in that remarkable brain of his. One final question, Mr. Wilson. Your assistant. Spaulding, has he ever mentioned any acquaintances, any visitors to the shop, or anything unusual in his behavior? Wilson frowned, his ruddy face creasing. Can't say he has. He's a quiet lad, keeps to himself. Spends a deal of time in the cellar with his photography, but that's no bother to me. He's a good worker, and I've no cause to complain. Holmes rose, extending his hand. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. You have been most helpful. I advise you to proceed with your application today, but say nothing of this conversation to your assistant or anyone else. We shall call upon you soon. Wilson, still muttering about the inconvenience, shook our hands and departed, his crimson head bobbing through the crowd. Holmes watched him go, his expression one of deep contemplation. Well, Watson, said he, as we stepped back into the drizzle, what do you make of it? I shook my head. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever heard. A league for red-headed men. It defies reason. Reason, said Holmes, is precisely what we must apply. The League is a pretext, what's seen a blind to conceal some deeper design. The question is, what? And why go to such lengths to involve a pawnbroker with red hair? We returned to Baker Street, where Holmes spent the afternoon in a frenzy of activity, consulting maps, sending telegrams, and poring over his index of criminal records. I, meanwhile, attempted to resume my medical reading, but my thoughts were consumed by the mystery. Who was behind the Red-Headed League? What was the purpose of this elaborate charade? And what role did Vincent Spaulding, with his photographic pursuits, play in the affair? As evening fell, Holmes emerged from his reverie, his face alight with purpose. Watson, said he, I have a theory, but it requires confirmation. Tomorrow, we shall visit Saxe-Coburg Square and inspect Mr. Wilson's establishment. I suspect the key to this puzzle lies not in Pope's Court, but in the pawnbroker's shop itself. I nodded, my curiosity now fully ablaze. And what of Spaulding? Do you suspect him? Holmes's eyes gleamed. Let us say, Watson, that I find his enthusiasm for the League suggestive, but come, it grows late, and we have a busy day ahead. Let us fortify ourselves with Mrs. Hudson's excellent supper, and prepare for what promises to be a most instructive adventure. Thus began the singular case of the Red-Headed League, a mystery that, even in its opening chapter, promised to test the limits of Holmes's genius and reveal the hidden currents that flow beneath the surface of London's teeming streets. Chapter 2. The Pawnbroker's Tales. The drizzle of the previous day had given way to a sullen, overcast sky as Sherlock Holmes and I sat in the coffee-house on Fleet Street, the clamour of the city muffled by the steamed windows. Across from us sat Jabez Wilson, the pawnbroker, his ruddy face flushed with a mixture of indignation and bewilderment as he recounted the extraordinary circumstances that had brought him to Pope's Court. His crimson hair, vivid even in the dim light, seemed almost aglow with the intensity of his narrative, and his small, shrewd eyes darted between Holmes and me as if seeking reassurance that his tale was not the stuff of madness. Holmes, leaning forward with his elbows upon the table, listened with that peculiar intensity which transformed him from a languid observer into a coiled spring of intellect. His long fingers toyed absently with a teaspoon, but his grey eyes never left Wilson's face, absorbing every detail with the precision of a photographer's lens. I, too, found myself drawn into the pawnbroker's story, though I confess it was as much the absurdity of the affair as the man's earnestness that held my attention. "It was some 8 weeks ago, Mr. Holmes," began Wilson, his voice gruff but steady, "that my assistant, Vincent Spaulding, first brought the matter to my notice. I keep a small pawn shop in Saxe-Coburg Square, a quiet enough corner of London, and I've managed well enough these past 20 years, though I'll not pretend it's made me a rich man. I'm a widower with no kin to speak of, and my wants are simple. Spaulding came to me nigh on 6 months ago, seeking work. A bright lad, quick with figures, and willing to take half wages, which suited me fine, for trade's been lean of late." Holmes nodded, his expression unreadable. "Describe this Spaulding," said he. "His appearance, his habits, his character." Wilson scratched his chin, his thick fingers rasping against the stubble. "He's a young fellow, not yet 30, I'd wager. Slight build, dark hair, sharp features like a fox, if you'll pardon the comparison. Got a quick tongue, too, and a way of making you feel he's always one step ahead. He's clever, no doubt, and good with customers, though he's got a peculiar fancy for photography. Spends half his time in the cellar, developing his pictures. Says it's a hobby, but he's mighty keen on it." "Photography," mused Holmes, his eyes narrowing. "And does he leave the shop often, or receive visitors?" "Not often," said Wilson. "He's a solitary sort, keeps to himself. Once or twice I've seen him step out to the post office, but he's never gone for long. As for visitors, none that I recall, save the usual clients pawning their trinkets." Holmes's fingers ceased their restless motion, and he leaned back, his gaze fixed upon some distant point. "Go on, Mr. Wilson. Tell us of the advertisement." Wilson took a sip of his coffee, grimacing as though it were too bitter for his taste. "It was a Monday morning, as I said, some 8 weeks back. I was behind the counter, sorting pledges, when Spaulding comes up from the cellar with the Daily Telegraph in his hand. 'Mr. Wilson,' says he, 'here's a chance you'd be a fool to miss.' And he shows me that queer notice about the Red-Headed League. Well, I laughed at first, thought it a joke. You see, but Spaulding was in earnest. 'Your hair's the reddest I ever saw,' says he, 'and £4 a week for next to nothing. You'd be mad not to try for it.'" "And you were persuaded?" asked Holmes. Wilson's face reddened, though whether from embarrassment or irritation, I could not tell. "I'm not a vain man, Mr. Holmes, but I'll own my hair is a fine shade, and the money was tempting. Trade's been slow, as I said, and £4 a week would keep the wolf from the door. So I told Spaulding I'd go, and he offered to mind the shop while I was away. He's a good lad, never shirks his work, and I trusted him to manage." Holmes's lips twitched, as if suppressing a smile. "And what happened when you reached Pope's Court?" Wilson's eyes widened, and he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "It was bedlam, sir. I went the very next day, and the alley was packed with red-headed men, scores of them, pushing and shoving like a mob at a fair. There were clerks, labourers, gentlemen in fine coats, all with hair red as mine, or near enough. I thought I'd never get through, but I'm a sturdy fellow, and I elbowed my way to the door. After a long wait, I was called into a little office, no bigger than a cupboard, where a man named Duncan Ross was waiting." "Describe him," said Holmes sharply. "He was a wiry chap, middle-aged, with a face red as a beet though weather. From drink or nature, I couldn't say. Had a sharp way about him, like he was sizing me up. He took one look at my hair, pulled out a magnifying glass, and studied it like it was a rare coin. "Magnificent," says he, "the finest specimen in London." Before I knew it, he was shaking my hand and telling me I was hired. "And your duties?" asked Holmes, his voice betraying a trace of eagerness. Wilson spread his hands, his expression one of baffled incredulity. "That's the queerest part, Mr. Holmes. I'm to copy the Encyclopedia Britannica by hand. 4 hours a day, starting with the letter A. They've got a set of volumes in the office. And I'm to write out every word, neat as you please. In a ledger they provide. £4 a week, paid on the spot, and no questions asked. I've been at it these 8 weeks, going every morning from 10 to 2, while Spaulding minds the shop." Holmes's eyes gleamed with that peculiar light which I knew signaled assent. And this morning, he prompted. Wilson's face darkened, and he struck the table with his fist. "This morning, Mr. Holmes, I went as usual, only to find the door locked and a note pinned to it. 'The Red-Headed League is dissolved,' it said, and not a word more. 8 weeks I've given to this nonsense, and now it's over, with no explanation, no apology, nothing. I'm out of pocket and out of patience, and that's why I've come to you. Spaulding swears it's no prank, but I smell a rat." Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his expression one of profound concentration. "A most remarkable tale, Mr. Wilson," said he. "Tell me, have you noticed anything unusual in your shop during these 8 weeks? Any changes, however slight?" Wilson frowned, his brows knitting together. "Nothing out of the ordinary, save that Spaulding's been spending more time in the cellar. Says he's perfecting his photography, but it's no bother to me. The shop's been quiet, with me away each morning, but he's managed well enough." Holmes's eyes flicked to mine, and I knew at once that he had seized upon some thread invisible to me. "One final question," said he. "This Duncan Ross, did he mention any other members of the League, or the nature of its operations?" "Not a word," said Wilson. "He was all business. Just told me to show up and start copying. Said the League was funded by Hopkins's bequest, but I didn't press him. Seemed too good to question, if I'm honest." Holmes rose, extending his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson. You have been most illuminating. I advise you to return to your shop and say nothing of this to Spaulding or anyone else. We shall call upon you soon to discuss the matter further." Wilson shook our hands, his grip firm but his expression still clouded with confusion. "I hope you can make sense of it, Mr. Holmes," said he. "I feel a proper fool, but if there's mischief, I'd like to know it." As he departed, his crimson head vanishing into the crowd, Holmes turned to me, his face alight with that fierce energy which I knew presaged a chase. "Well, Watson," said he, "what do you make of our pawnbroker's tale?" I shook my head, still grappling with the strangeness of it all. "It's the most outlandish thing I've ever heard, Holmes. A league for red-headed men, copying an encyclopedia. It sounds like the work of a lunatic, or a genius," said Holmes, his voice low and thoughtful. "The absurdity is deliberate. Watson, a smokescreen to conceal a deeper purpose. Consider the facts. A fictitious league, an elaborate ruse to occupy Wilson each morning, and an assistant with a curious penchant for cellar work. There is a pattern here, and I mean to trace it." We stepped out into the drizzle, the air sharp, with the scent of wet stone and coal smoke. Holmes hailed a hansom, his mind already racing ahead. To Saxe-Coburg Square, he called to the driver. We must see this pawn shop for ourselves. I have a suspicion, Watson, that the key to this mystery lies not in Pope's Court, but in the unassuming premises of Jabez Wilson. As the cab rattled through the crowded streets, I pondered the pawnbroker's tale, my mind our-world with questions. What was the true purpose of the Red-Headed League? Who was Vincent Spaulding, and what role did his photographic pursuits play in this affair? And above all, what scheme could justify such an elaborate deception? I glanced at Holmes, his profile sharp against the dim light of the cab, and knew that, whatever the answers, he would uncover them with that relentless intellect which had so often pierced the veil of London's mysteries. Chapter 3. The scene of the crime. The rain had ceased by the time Sherlock Holmes and I reached Saxe-Coburg Square, a quiet, somewhat faded corner of London where the bustle of the city seemed to falter, as if reluctant to intrude upon its sleepy dignity. The afternoon light, filtered through a veil of grey clouds, cast a muted glow upon the cobbled streets, where modest shops and lodging-houses stood shoulder to shoulder in unassuming rows. Jabez Wilson's pawnshop, marked by the familiar 3 golden balls suspended above its door, occupied a narrow frontage between a tobacconist's to the left and a branch of the City and Suburban Bank to the right. The bank's polished brass sign gleamed in contrast to the pawnshop's weathered facade, its windows clouded with dust and the wear of years. Holmes, his ulster buttoned against the damp chill, surveyed the scene with the keenness of a hawk, his grey eyes darting from the pawnshop to the bank and back again. He paced the pavement, his stick tapping rhythmically upon the stones, producing a faint, hollow echo that seemed to intrigue him. "Watson," said he, pausing before the pawnshop's entrance, "do you observe anything remarkable about this location?" I confess, I saw little out of the ordinary. The square was quiet, save for the occasional passerby, a clerk hurrying home, a woman with a market basket, a boy hawking evening papers. The bank, with its solid oak door and barred windows, exuded an air of unyielding security, while Wilson's shop, with its cluttered display of watches, rings, and tarnished silver, suggested only the modest trade of a struggling pawnbroker. "Nothing strikes me, Holmes," I admitted. "It's a quiet enough spot, I suppose, but unremarkable save for the bank's presence." "Precisely," said Holmes, his voice low and vibrant with suppressed excitement. "The bank, a branch of the City and Suburban, no less, with vaults that undoubtedly hold treasures far beyond the trinkets in Wilson's window. And observe this." He knelt suddenly, tapping the pavement before the pawnshop with his stick. The sound was unmistakably hollow, as if the stones concealed a void beneath. "A cellar, Watson, and a commodious one, I'll wager. Most convenient for a man with a passion for photography, would you not agree?" I nodded, beginning to grasp the thread of his reasoning. "You suspect Spaulding's activities in the cellar are connected to the League?" Holmes rose, brushing the dust from his knees. "I suspect, Watson, that Vincent Spaulding is no more a mere assistant than the Red-Headed League is a charitable institution. But come, let us test the waters. A visit to Mr. Wilson's shop may prove illuminating." We pushed open the pawnshop's door, a bell jingling faintly above us. The interior was dim, its air heavy with the musty scent of old leather and polished metal. Shelves lined the walls, laden with the detritus of pawned lives clocks, candlesticks, a violin with a broken string, a pair of dueling pistols in a velvet case. Behind the counter stood a young man, slight of build, with sharp, fox-like features, and a shock of dark hair. His eyes, quick and wary, flickered over us as we entered, and though his smile was polite, there was a guardedness in his manner that did not escape me. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," said he, his voice smooth but tinged with a trace of unease. "May I assist you with a pledge or a redemption?" Holmes, adopting the air of a casual browser, stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "Good afternoon," said he, his tone genial. "I am Sherlock Holmes, and this is my friend, Dr. Watson." We were passing and could not resist. The curiosity of a pawnbroker's wares. "You are Mr. Spaulding, I presume?" The young man's eyes narrowed slightly, but his smile held. "Vincent Spaulding, at your service. Mr. Wilson's not here just now, he's attending to a matter at Pope's Court. But I'd be happy to show you anything that catches your eye." Holmes wandered to a display case, peering at a silver watch as if it held his entire attention. "A fine establishment," said he. "I understand Mr. Wilson has been much occupied of late with this business of the Red-Headed League. A curious affair, is it not?" Spaulding's fingers twitched, and for a moment I thought I saw a flash of alarm in his eyes, but he recovered swiftly. "Oh, the League," said he, with a light laugh. "A queer business, but it's brought Mr. Wilson a tidy sum. He's been at it these 8 weeks, copying away at their office. Leaves me to mind the shop, which suits me well enough, indeed," said Holmes, his voice deceptively mild. "And you encouraged him to apply, I believe. A stroke of good fortune to spot that advertisement." Spaulding shrugged, his manner studiedly casual. "I saw it in the paper and thought it a lark. Mr. Wilson's hair's red as a flame seemed a perfect fit. He's pleased with the work, and the pay's fair." Holmes nodded, as if satisfied, and turned to examine a tray of rings. "You must find it quiet here, with your employer absent each morning. Do you manage alone?" "Well enough," said Spaulding. "Trade's slow most days, but I keep busy. Got my own interests, you see." He gestured vaguely toward the back of the shop, where a narrow door led, I presumed, to the cellar. "Photography, is it?" asked Holmes, his tone one of polite curiosity. "A fascinating pursuit. Do you develop your own prints?" Spaulding's eyes flickered, and I sensed a tightening in his posture. I do," said he. "There's a dark room in the cellar. Keeps me out of mischief." Holmes smiled, as if charmed by the young man's candor. "A capital hobby. Well, Mr. Spaulding, we shan't detain you further. My friend and I were merely curious about the shop. Good day to you." "Good day, gentlemen," said Spaulding, his relief palpable as we turned to leave. As we stepped back into the square, Holmes's genial air vanished, replaced by a look of fierce concentration. "Did you mark him, Watson?" said he, his voice low. The quickness of his glance, the tension in his hands. "Vincent Spaulding is no ordinary shop assistant. He is clever, cautious, and, I suspect, at the heart of this affair." I glanced back at the pawn shop, its windows glinting dully in the fading light. "You believe he's involved in some scheme?" "I am certain of it," said Holmes. "The Red-Headed League was designed to remove Jabez Wilson from this shop each morning, leaving Spaulding free to pursue his photography undisturbed. And that hollow pavement suggests a cellar with possibilities beyond developing prints. Come, Watson, we must make further inquiries." We crossed the square to the City and Suburban Bank, its imposing facade a stark contrast to the pawn shop's modesty. Holmes, with that effortless authority which opened so many doors, requested an interview with the manager, a Mr. Merriweather, whom we found in a spacious office adorned with ledgers and portraits of sober-faced bankers. Merryweather was a portly, pompous man, his waistcoat strained across his ample frame, his manner one of irritable self-importance. "Mr. Holmes," said he, peering over his spectacles, "I am a busy man. What is this about? I trust it is not some trivial matter." Holmes seated himself, his expression grave. "Far from trivial, Mr. Merryweather. I have reason to believe your bank is the target of a criminal enterprise, one connected to the pawn shop." Next door, Merryweather's florid face paled. "Good heavens, the pawn shop, that shabby little place. What nonsense is this?" "No nonsense," said Holmes. "Have you noticed anything unusual in recent weeks? Any disturbances? Any strangers loitering about?" Merryweather shook his head, though a flicker of unease crossed his features. "Nothing of note, save the usual business. We received a consignment of French gold bullion last week, £30,000 worth, but our vaults are impregnable, and our security is beyond reproach." Holmes's eyes gleamed. "And these vaults, they lie directly beneath this building, do they?" "Not, why, yes," said Merryweather, frowning. "But I assure you, no one could breach them without detection." "No doubt," said Holmes. "But I propose we keep a vigil tonight, Mr. Merryweather. If my suspicions are correct, an attempt may be made upon your gold. Will you join us?" Merryweather sputtered, his skepticism warring with his alarm. "A vigil? This is most irregular." "Mr. Holmes, but if you believe there is danger, I suppose I must comply. I shall bring my head clerk, and we shall expect you at 9 o'clock. As we left the bank, Holmes's step was brisk, his face alight with purpose. "The pieces are falling into place, Watson," said he. "Spaulding's cellar, the bank's vaults, the League's russet, all points to a single end. We must alert Inspector Jones at Scotland Yard and prepare for tonight. I fancy we shall catch our fox in the act." I followed him into the gathering dusk, my mind racing with the implications of his words. The pawn shop, the bank, the mysterious Spaulding, what dark design lay beneath this facade of absurdity. As we hailed a cab to Baker Street, I felt the familiar thrill of the chase, knowing that Sherlock Holmes was already several steps ahead, his mind weaving a net to ensnare the truth. Chapter 4. A consultation with the bank. The afternoon had deepened into a sullen twilight as Sherlock Holmes and I emerged from Jabez Wilson's pawnshop in Saxe-Coburg Square, the air heavy with the damp promise of further rain. The quiet of the square, broken only by the clatter of a passing hansom and the distant cries of a newsboy, seemed to belie the undercurrent of intrigue that Holmes's keen senses had detected. His face, sharp and alert, bore that intensity which I had come to recognize as the harbinger of a case nearing its climax. Without a word, he strode toward the imposing facade of the City and Suburban Bank, its brass sign gleaming dully under the gas lamps that had just begun to flicker into life. "Watson," said he, pausing before the bank's heavy oak door, "we stand upon the threshold of a crime as audacious as it is ingenious. The bank is the key, and we must secure the cooperation of its guardian before nightfall." I nodded, though my mind still grappled with the puzzle. The Red-Headed League, with its absurd premise of employing red-headed men to copy an encyclopedia, seemed a world away from the solid respectability of a London bank. Yet Holmes's certainty, born of that relentless logic which saw patterns where others saw only chaos, was infectious. I followed him into the bank, where the air was thick with the scent of polished wood and ink, and the soft ticking of a clock marked the passage of the day's business. We were ushered into the office of Mr. Merryweather, the bank's manager. a man whose portly frame and florid countenance suggested a life of comfort rather than vigilance. His desk, a vast expanse of mahogany, was littered with ledgers and papers, and behind him hung a portrait of some venerable banking patriarch, whose stern gaze seemed to disapprove of our intrusion. Merryweather rose as we entered, his expression one of irritable curiosity, his small eyes peering over gold-rimmed spectacles. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I presume," said he, his voice booming with the authority of one accustomed to command. "And this must be Dr. Watson. I received your message." "Sir, but I confess I am at a loss. What is this nonsense about a threat to my bank? We are a fortress, sir, a fortress." Holmes seated himself with that calm assurance which never failed to disarm even the most recalcitrant of men. "Mr. Merryweather," said he, his voice smooth, but firm, "I do not come to you on a whim. My investigations have uncovered a plot of singular cunning centered upon your establishment. I believe an attempt will be made upon your vaults, possibly this very night." Merryweather's face reddened, and he struck the desk with a meaty fist. "Preposterous," he exclaimed. "Our vaults are impregnable, still lined, locked with Chubb's finest, and guarded by a night watchman. Besides, who would dare such a thing? That pawn shop next door. A more unlikely den of villainy I cannot imagine." Holmes's lips twitched, as if amused by the man's "The pawn shop, Mr. Merryweather, is precisely where the danger lies. Have you not noticed anything unusual in recent weeks? Strangers, loitering, noises from the premises next door, perhaps?" Merryweather frowned, his confidence wavering. "Well, now that you mention it, there have been some odd sound scrapings, faint thuds, as if someone were working in the cellar. I assumed it was that assistant of Wilson's, always tinkering with his photographs. But surely you don't suggest—" "Suggest nothing," said Holmes, his tone sharp. "I deduce. The Red-Headed League, which has occupied Mr. Wilson each morning, is a ruse designed to leave his shop and its cellar in the hands of his assistant, Vincent Spaulding. That cellar, sir, lies directly adjacent to your vaults, and the hollow pavement outside suggests a tunnel in progress." Merryweather's jaw dropped, and for a moment he seemed incapable of speech. "A tunnel," he sputtered at last. "To my vaults. But how, why?" Holmes leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with intensity. "The why is simple. Your vaults contain a consignment of French gold bullion, do they not? I understand it was delivered last week to the value of £30,000. Merryweather's face paled, and he sank back into his chair. "Good heavens, Mr. Holmes, how did you know that? The consignment is confidential, known only to myself and the directors." Holmes waved a hand, as if dismissing the question. "It is my business to know things, Mr. Merryweather. The gold is the prize, and the League is the means to secure it. Spaulding, or whatever his true name may be, has orchestrated this scheme to gain access to your vaults while Wilson is conveniently absent. I propose we keep a vigil tonight in your vault to catch the culprits in the act." Merryweather's eyes widened, and he clutched the arms of his chair. "A vigil in the vault? This is most irregular, Mr. Holmes. What if you're mistaken? I'll be the laughingstock of the board." "And if I am correct," said Holmes, his voice cold, "you will be the hero who saved £30,000. Surely that is worth a night's discomfort." Merryweather hesitated, his pride warring with his fear. At length he sighed heavily. "Very well, Mr. Holmes. I shall join you, though I confess I think this a wild goose chase. I shall bring my head clerk, Mr. Peacroft, and we shall meet you." Here at 9 o'clock. But I warn you, sir, if this proves a farce, I shall not be pleased." Holmes rose, his expression unruffled. "I assure you, Mr. Merriweather, you will not be disappointed. Bring a lantern, a weapon if you have one, and a stout heart. Dr. Watson and I shall handle the rest." As we left the bank, the first stars were piercing the overcast sky, and the square lay quiet, its shops shuttered for the night. Holmes paused, his gaze fixed upon the pawnshop's darkened windows. "Watson," said he, "we are on the cusp of a singular adventure. Spaulding is no ordinary criminal. His audacity, his patience, these are the marks of a mind both brilliant and dangerous." I glanced at the pawnshop, its faded sign barely visible in the gloom. "Do you know who he is, Holmes?" I asked. "Not yet," said he, "but I have my suspicions. His manner, his quickness, there is a certain criminal known to me, a man of education and cunning who fits the description. But we shall have our answer tonight. Come, we must alert Inspector Jones and prepare for the vigil." We hailed a cab to Scotland Yard, where Holmes secured the cooperation of Inspector Peter Jones, a wiry, sharp-eyed officer whose skepticism of Holmes's methods was tempered by a grudging respect for his results. Jones agreed to join us, bringing 2 constables for support, and we arranged a rendezvous at the bank at the appointed hour dot, as we returned to Baker Street to prepare. My mind raced with the implications of Holmes's deductions. The red-headed league, the pawnshop's cellar, the bank's gold all were threads in a web of deception, woven by a hand as yet unseen. I checked my revolver, its weight reassuring in my pocket, and glanced at Holmes, his profile sharp against the cab's window. Whatever lay ahead, I knew he was ready, his intellect a beacon in the gathering dark. Chapter 5. The Night Watch. The night had fallen heavy and moonless over London. The sky, a canopy of inky clouds that smothered the stars and cast Saxe-Coburg Square into a gloom broken only by the feeble glow of gas lamps. Sherlock Holmes and I, accompanied by Inspector Peter Jones of Scotland Yard and Mr. Merriweather, the bank manager, made our way to the city and suburban bank under the cover of darkness. The air was sharp with the bite of autumn, and a faint mist curled about the cobbles, lending an eerie stillness to the deserted square. The pawn shop of Jabez Wilson, its windows dark and shuttered, loomed silently beside the bank's imposing facade, a mute testament to the strange drama about to unfold. We entered the bank through a side door, Merriweather leading the way with a lantern that cast flickering shadows upon the polished marble floor. His manner was one of nervous agitation, his heavy frame trembling as he clutched a poker he had brought for defense. Inspector Jones, a lean, cynical man with a face like a ferret, followed close behind, his eyes darting suspiciously about the dim interior. 2 constables, sturdy fellows armed with truncheons, waited outside, stationed to guard the exits. Holmes, as ever, was the picture of calm resolve, his lean figure moving with the quiet grace of a panther, his eyes gleaming with that fierce concentration which betokened a mind wholly absorbed in the chase. We descended a narrow staircase to the bank's vault, a cavernous chamber of stone and steel that seemed to pulse with the weight of its secrets. The air was cold and damp, heavy with the scent of earth and iron. Rows of strong boxes lined the walls, their locks gleaming dully in the lantern's light, while at the center stood a massive safe, its door a slab of polished steel that guarded the French gold bullion Merriweather had spoken of. The manager set the lantern upon a crate, its beam illuminating the flagstone floor, which seemed to quiver faintly underfoot as if aware of the intrusion we anticipated. "Mr. Holmes," whispered Merriweather, his voice tremulous, "are you certain of this? The vault is impregnable. No one could breach it without raising the alarm." Holmes's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. "Impregnable to most, perhaps," said he, "but our adversary is no common thief. We must remain vigilant, Mr. Merriweather. Absolute silence, if you please. Watson, Jones, take your positions." We arranged ourselves in the shadows, Holmes and I crouching behind a stack of crates near the safe. Jones and Merriweather positioned opposite, where they could watch the floor. My revolver, a comforting weight in my hand, was at the ready, though I prayed it would not be needed. Holmes had instructed us to wait in darkness, the lantern extinguished to avoid alerting our quarry. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water from some unseen pipe and the faint creak of Merriweather's boots as he shifted uneasily. Time crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity. My limbs grew stiff, and the chill of the stone seeped through my coat, yet Holmes remained motionless, his eyes fixed upon the floor with the intensity of a hawk watching its prey. Jones, though skeptical of Holmes's methods, held his peace, his sharp features taut with anticipation. Merriweather, less disciplined, fidgeted incessantly, his poker clutched like a talisman against the unknown. It was nearing 1 o'clock when a faint sound broke the stillness, a soft, grating rasp like stone scraping against stone. My heart quickened, and I felt Holmes's hand upon my arm, a silent command to remain still. The sound grew louder, more distinct, and a thin crack of light appeared in the floor, widening as a section of flagstone was cautiously lifted. The beam of a lantern flickered through the gap, followed by the glint of a hand, pale and sinewy, gripping the edge of the stone. A head emerged, its features sharp and predatory in the dim light. It was Vincent Spaulding, or so I presumed, though his eyes, gleaming with a fierce cunning, bespoke a man far removed from the deferential shop assistant we had met. He moved with the stealth of a cat, easing himself into the vault, his lantern casting wild shadows upon the walls. Behind him came another figure, burly and broad-shouldered, with a red face and a coarse manner. Duncan Ross, I later learned. The supposed agent of the Red-Headed League. Holmes's grip tightened on my arm, signaling patience. Spaulding, unaware of our presence, crept toward the safe, his movements precise and deliberate. He produced a set of tools from a leather satchel, their metal glinting as he set to work upon the lock. Ross, less composed, stood guard, his eyes darting nervously about the vault. The faint click of Spaulding's tools was the only sound, each turn of the pick a step closer to their prize. At a nod from Holmes, Inspector Jones sprang forward, his voice ringing out in the confined space. "Hold, in the name of the law," he shouted, lunging at Spaulding, who spun with a snarl, his hand diving for a pistol at his belt. I raised my revolver, but Holmes was faster, his stick cracking sharply across Spaulding's wrist, sending the weapon clattering to the floor. Jones seized the man, pinning his arms as the constables rushed in from the stairs. Ross, panicked, made a dash for the tunnel, but Holmes was upon him in an instant, his lean frame belying a strength that brought the burly man to his knees. "Stay where you are, sir," said Holmes, his voice cold as steel. "Your scheme is at an end." Merriweather, roused at last from his stupor, brandished his poker with belated bravado, his face a mixture of triumph and disbelief. "Good God, Mr. Holmes," he cried, "you were right. The gold, my gold, is safe." The tunnel, revealed by the open flagstone, stretched from the vault to the cellar of Wilson's pawnshop, a marvel of criminal ingenuity, lined with timber supports and lit by a string of lanterns. Spaulding, or rather John Clay, as Holmes later identified him, glared at us with a defiance that bordered on insolence, while Ross, less resolute, muttered curses as the constables bound his wrists. Holmes surveyed the scene, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. "A neat piece of work, Watson," said he, as we emerged into the night air, the prisoners in tow. "Clay is a man of rare talent, but he has met his match tonight." As we handed the culprits to Jones's men, I glanced at the pawnshop, its dark windows now a silent witness to the drama that had unfolded beneath. The Red-Headed League, a fiction born of cunning, had led us to this moment, and though the night was far from over, I knew that Holmes's relentless mind had already begun to unravel the threads of this singular affair. Chapter 6. The motive revealed. The first grey light of dawn was creeping over the rooftops of London as Sherlock Holmes and I returned to the warmth of 221 B Baker Street, our breath visible in the chill morning air. The events of the night, the silent vigil in the bank's vault, the sudden emergence of John Clay and his accomplice, and the swift apprehension of the would-be thieves had left my nerves taut and my mind awhirl with questions. The Red-Headed League, that bizarre fiction which had drawn us into this affair, seemed now a mere shadow, its purpose laid bare by the tunnel stretching from Jabez Wilson's pawnshop to the City and Suburban Bank's vault. Yet the full scope of the scheme, and the mind behind it, remained to be illuminated. Holmes, as was his custom after such an adventure, was in high spirits, his lean frame vibrating with the satisfaction of a puzzle well solved. He flung himself into his armchair, tossing his ulster over the back and reaching for his pipe. "Well, Watson," said he, lighting a match with a flourish, "what do you make of our little drama in Saxe-Coburg Square? A pretty piece of work, was it not?" I sank into my own chair, the fire's warmth a welcome relief after the damp cold of the vault. "Pretty, perhaps, but devilishly cunning," I replied. "To concoct such a scheme, the League, the encyclopedia, the tunnel, it's almost beyond belief. But why go to such lengths, Holmes? Why not simply rob the bank outright?" Holmes's eyes gleamed with that peculiar intensity which betokened a mind still engaged with the intricacies of the case. "Simplicity, my dear Watson, is not the hallmark of a man like John Clay," said he, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "Let us reconstruct the matter, step by step, and the motive will become clear." He rose, pacing the room with his hands clasped behind his back, his voice taking on the measured cadence of a lecturer. "Consider the facts. Jabez Wilson, a pawnbroker of modest means, is lured from his shop each morning by the promise of £4 a week for the absurd task of copying the encyclopedia. Britannica, the advertisement, placed in the Daily Telegraph, is designed to appeal to his vanity and his need, ensuring his compliance. For 8 weeks, he is absent from 10 to 2, leaving his shop and its cellar in the hands of his assistant, Vincent Spaulding, whom we now know to be John Clay, a criminal of remarkable ingenuity." I nodded, following his reasoning, and the cellar, with its proximity to the bank's vault, was the true object of the scheme. "Precisely," said Holmes, pausing to tap his pipe against the mantel. "The Red-Headed League was a fiction, a brilliant distraction to keep Wilson occupied, while Clay and his accomplice Duncan Ross, a hired hand with a flair for theatrics, tunneled from the pawnshop cellar to the bank's vault. The hollow pavement we noted yesterday was the first clue, confirmed by the tunnel we discovered tonight. Their goal was the French gold bullion, valued at £30,000, recently deposited in the City and Suburban Bank. But the League itself? I interjected, why such an elaborate ruse? Surely there were simpler ways to remove Wilson from his shop. Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile. Simpler, perhaps, but less certain. Wilson is a man of routine, not easily persuaded to abandon his business. The League, with its promise of easy money and its appeal to his pride in his red hair, was tailored to his character. It ensured his absence without arousing his suspicion, and it provided a plausible explanation for his daily journeys to Pope's Court. Clay, you see, is a master of human nature as well as crime. He knew that a man like Wilson would not question a scheme that flattered his vanity and filled his purse. I leaned forward, my curiosity piqued. And Duncan Ross? What part did he play? A minor one, said Holmes, resuming his pacing. Ross, whose real name is likely as false as the League itself, was the front man, the face of the operation. His role was to conduct the interviews, select Wilson, and maintain the illusion of the League's legitimacy. The office at Pope's Court, sparsely furnished and temporary, was a stage set, nothing more. When the tunnel was complete, the League was dissolved, leaving Wilson bewildered but none the wiser. I shook my head, marveling at the audacity of it all. And the encyclopedia? Was that merely to keep Wilson occupied? Exactly, said Holmes. The task was chosen for its absurdity and its duration. Copying the Encyclopedia Britannica by hand is a labor so tedious that it would deter any man from questioning its purpose, especially when paid handsomely for it. It kept Wilson out of the shop for precisely the hours needed to dig the tunnel, and it ensured he would not return unexpectedly. I sat back, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, and the gold clay knew of its arrival. Holmes nodded, his eyes narrowing. That, Watson, is where his genius lies. The consignment of French gold was a recent addition to the bank's vault, known only to a select few. Clay, I suspect, has informants perhaps, a clerk or a porter in the bank's employ who tipped him to the opportunity. He then devised the League to exploit the unique geography of Saxe-Coburg Square, where the pawnshop cellar abuts the bank's vault. It was a plan requiring patience, precision, and nerve, but Clay is no ordinary criminal. I glanced at the window where the first rays of sunlight were beginning to pierce the gloom. And now he is in custody, thanks to you. But who is he, Holmes? You spoke of him as if he were known to you. Holmes returned to his chair, his expression thoughtful. John Clay is a name that has crossed my path before, Watson. He is a man of education Oxford, I believe, with a mind as sharp as a razor. He turned to crime not from necessity, but from inclination, for the thrill of outwitting his foes. His record includes burglaries, forgeries, and a daring theft from a Manchester jeweller. Yet he has always eluded justice until now. His capture tonight is a blow to the criminal underworld, though I suspect he will not remain caged for long. I shuddered at the thought of such a man loose upon the streets and the bank. Will Merryweather recover from the shock? Holmes chuckled, a rare sound that softened the severity of his features. Merryweather is a man of bluster, but he has cause to be grateful. His gold is safe and his reputation intact, thanks to our vigil. He will dine out on the tale for years, though I dare say he will omit our part in it. I smiled, warmed by the fire and the satisfaction of a case resolved. And poor Wilson, what will become of him? A simple soul, said Holmes, but a resilient one. He will grumble at the deception, but his business is unharmed, and his pride will mend. The true victim here is the bank, though they owe us their thanks. As for Clay, his ingenuity has been his undoing, but I confess I admire the audacity of his scheme. He leaned back, his pipe sending curls of smoke toward the ceiling. And for a moment we sat in companionable silence, the weight of the night's events settling upon us. The Red-Headed League, a chimera born of criminal genius, had been exposed, its motive laid bare in the cold light of dawn. Yet I knew that for Holmes, the thrill of the chase was already giving way to the anticipation of the next puzzle, the next glimpse into the dark heart of London's mysteries. Chapter 7. The Criminal Mind. The morning sun streamed through the windows of 221B Baker Street, casting long shadows across the cluttered sitting room where Sherlock Holmes and I sat in the aftermath of our adventure in Saxe-Coburg Square. The fire crackled softly in the grate, and the air was thick with the aroma of Mrs. Hudson's coffee, which stood cooling on the table between us. Holmes, lounging in his armchair with his long legs stretched toward the hearth, puffed contentedly at his pipe, his grey eyes half closed in that state of meditative languor which often followed the resolution of a case. Yet I knew his mind was far from idle, turning over the details of the Red-Headed League with the precision of a watchmaker. I, too, was preoccupied, my thoughts lingering on the audacious figure of John Clay, whose capture in the bank's vault had brought our singular adventure to its climax. The man's cunning, his cool defiance, even in defeat, had left an impression upon me, and I found myself wondering what drove such a mind to crime. "Holmes," I ventured, breaking the companionable silence, "what is it that compels a man?" "Like John Clay, he is no common thief," you said. "With his education, his intellect, he might have excelled in any honest profession. Why choose this path?" Holmes opened his eyes, a faint smile playing upon his lips as he regarded me. "An excellent question, Watson," said he, setting his pipe upon the table. "The criminal mind is a subject of endless fascination, for it reveals the shadow side of human nature, those impulses that lurk beneath the veneer of civilization. John Clay is a case in point, a man whose brilliance is matched only by his perversity. He rose, his lean frame moving with that restless energy which betokened a mind eager to expound. Consider Clay's history," he continued, pacing before the fire. "Born to a respectable family, educated at Oxford, with every advantage of breeding and opportunity, he might have been a barrister, a scholar, or a statesman. Yet he turned to crime, not from want or desperation, but from a craving for the game itself. To men like Clay, the world is a chessboard, and crime is the ultimate challenger test of wit, nerve, and audacity against the forces of law and order." I leaned forward, intrigued despite myself. "But surely, Holmes, there must be some deeper motive, greed, ambition, or perhaps a grudge against society." Holmes shook his head, his expression thoughtful. "Greed is a factor, no doubt. The French gold bullion was a prize worth £30,000, a fortune by any measure. But for Clay, the money is secondary. The thrill lies in the execution of the scheme, the outwitting of his adversaries. The Red-Headed League was not merely a means to an end. It was a performance, a masterpiece of deception designed to showcase his genius, the absurdity of the League, the meticulous planning of the tunnel, the manipulation of poor Jabez Wilson. These were as much a part of his satisfaction as the prospect of the gold itself. I frowned, struggling to comprehend such a mindset. But to risk so much imprisonment, disgrace for a mere thrill, it seems madness. "Not madness, Watson," but a kind of logic turned upon itself, said Holmes, pausing to gaze out the window at the bustling street below. The criminal mind, when gifted with intellect, seeks what the honest mind often lacks, a stage for its brilliance. Clay could have prospered in lawful pursuits, but where is the challenge in routine? A barrister pleads cases already won. A scholar writes for a handful of peers. A statesman navigates a world of compromise. But a criminal like Clay pits himself against the best minds of Scotland Yard, against men like myself, in a contest where the stakes are life and liberty. To him, that is worth any risk. I shuddered at the thought, recalling Clay's sharp features and defiant glare as the constables led him away. And yet you caught him, Holmes. His genius was no match for yours. Holmes's smile was tinged with irony, a compliment, Watson, but not entirely accurate. Clay's plan was near flawless. His error lay in underestimating the curiosity of a pawnbroker and the persistence of a detective. Had Wilson not sought my aid, or had I failed to note the hollow pavement, Clay might be halfway to Paris with his gold by now. The line between success and failure in such schemes is razor-thin. I sipped my coffee, now cold, and considered. His words, what of his accomplice, Duncan Ross? Is he of the same mould? Holmes shook his head, resuming his seat. Ross is a lesser creature, a hired hand with a talent for play-acting. His role was to lend credibility to the League, to pose as its agent and manage the farce at Pope's court. He lacks Clay's vision, his daring. Men like Ross are the foot soldiers of crime, useful but expendable. Clay, I suspect, chose him for his obedience and his ability to follow a script, nothing more. And Jabez Wilson, I asked, will he recover from this deception? Holmes chuckled, a low, dry sound. Wilson is a man of simple wants and simpler vanities. The loss of his £4 a week will sting, but his shop remains, and his pride, though bruised, will heal. He is fortunate, in a way, to have been merely a pawn in Clay's game rather than a victim of greater harm. I shall call upon him tomorrow to ensure he is none the worse for his adventure. I nodded, my thoughts turning to the broader implications of the case and the bank. Merryweather must be singing your praises. Holmes's expression darkened. Slightly, Merryweather is a man of bluster and self-importance, Watson. He will claim the credit for saving his gold, no doubt, but he owes us his gratitude. The City and Suburban Bank has escaped a catastrophic loss, and the tale of the red-headed League will serve as a warning to others of the ingenuity that lurks beneath London's surface. He leaned back, his pipe once more in hand, and for a moment we sat in silence, the weight of the case settling upon us. The red-headed League, a chimera born of John Clay's twisted brilliance, had been dismantled, its motive laid bare in the cold light of reason. Yet I could not shake the image of Clay's defiant eyes, nor the unsettling truth that such a mind, so akin to Holmes's own in its clarity and cunning, had chosen a path so dark. Holmes, I said at last, do you ever fear that you and Clay are two sides of the same coin? Your minds, your methods, there is a similarity, is there not? Holmes's gaze sharpened, and for a moment I thought I had overstepped, but then he smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened the severity of his features. A perceptive question, Watson. The difference lies in purpose. Clay seeks to conquer, I seek to understand. He creates chaos, I restore order, but I confess there is a certain kinship in our methods, a recognition of the game, the challenge. Were I to turn my mind to crime, I might rival Clay's audacity. But that is a path I shall never tread. I smiled, reassured by his words, though a shiver ran through me at the thought of such a mind turned to evil. The fire crackled, and the morning unfolded before us, bright with the promise of new mysteries. For now, the Red-Headed League was no more, its architect in chains, and Sherlock Holmes, the guardian of London's order, sat content, his pipe smoke curling toward the ceiling like the threads of a puzzle yet to come. Chapter 8. The final threads. Several days had passed since the dramatic events in the vault of the City and Suburban Bank, and the affair of the Red-Headed League had begun to settle into that peculiar clarity which follows the resolution of a great mystery. The morning was bright, with a crisp autumn breeze rattling the windows of 2-1B Baker Street, where Sherlock Holmes and I sat over a late breakfast. The room was its usual chaos of papers, chemical vials, and the lingering scent of tobacco, yet there was a tranquility about it, as if the very air had exhaled after the tension of our recent adventure. Holmes, clad in his dressing gown, perused a stack of morning papers, his sharp features softened by a rare contentment, while I, with a cup of tea in hand, reflected on the singular case that had so recently consumed us. The capture of John Clay and his accomplice, Duncan Ross, had sent ripples through London's criminal and banking circles alike. The newspapers, quick to seize upon the sensational, had spun tales of a daring heist thwarted by the vigilance of the bank's manager, Mr. Merriweather, with scant mention of Holmes's pivotal role. This omission, I knew, troubled my friend. Not at all. He cared little for public acclaim, finding his reward in the unraveling of the puzzle itself. Yet I could not help but feel a pang of injustice on his behalf, for without his relentless intellect, the French gold bullion would now be in the hands of a master criminal. As I sipped my tea, my thoughts turned to Jabez Wilson, the unwitting pawn in Clay's elaborate scheme. The pawnbroker's indignation at the dissolution of the Red-Headed League had been palpable, and I wondered how he fared in the wake of such a deception. "Holmes," I ventured, setting down my cup, "have you heard anything of Jabez Wilson since our night in the vault?" The poor fellow must still be reeling from the shock. Holmes lowered his paper, his grey eyes glinting with amusement. "Wilson is a creature of resilience, Watson," said he, folding the broadsheet with a practiced flick. "I called upon him yesterday, as I promised, and found him in his shop, grumbling as much as ever, but otherwise unscathed. He has sacked his assistant Clay, or Spaulding, as he knew Haymond is seeking a new one, though I suspect he will scrutinize applicants with a keener eye henceforth." I smiled at the image of the florid-faced pawnbroker, his crimson hair, a beacon of his wounded pride, and the shop itself. "Has he discovered anything further about the tunnel?" Holmes leaned back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "The tunnel has been sealed by order of the bank, and Scotland Yard has inspected the premises. It was a remarkable feat of engineering, Watson, some 50 feet in length, shored with timber, and dug with a precision that speaks to Clay's meticulous nature. Wilson, for his part, is blissfully ignorant of its full extent. He believes it a mere curiosity, a relic of his assistant's treachery. I thought it best not to enlighten him further, lest his indignation overwhelm his constitution." I chuckled, imagining Wilson's bluster at such a revelation. He is fortunate to have escaped with his business intact. But what of Clay and Ross? Have they spoken? Holmes's expression grew serious, and he reached for his pipe, tamping fresh tobacco into the bowl. "Clay is a man of iron, Watson. He has said nothing, save to taunt Inspector Jones with cryptic remarks about the inevitability of his escape. Ross, less fortified, has offered little of value, a few mumbled confessions that confirm what we already know. The League was Clay's brainchild, conceived to exploit the unique geography of Saxe-Coburg Square. Ross was hired for his ability to play the part of Duncan Ross, the League's supposed agent, and for his willingness to follow orders. Beyond that, he knows little of Clay's broader plans or connections. I frowned, troubled by the thought of Clay's defiance. Do you believe he will escape, Holmes? You spoke of his cunning, his resourcefulness. Holmes lit his pipe, the match casting a brief glow across his angular features. It is not impossible, he admitted, exhaling a curl of smoke. Clay is a man of extraordinary gifts, and the criminal underworld has resources we can scarcely imagine. But Jones is no fool, and Newgate is no easy fortress to breach. For now, Clay is secure, though I shall keep an ear to the ground. Men of his ilk are like comets rarely seen, but prone to return when least expected. I nodded, my thoughts drifting to the broader implications of the case. The Red-Headed League, with its absurd premise and intricate execution, had revealed a world of hidden motives and unseen dangers lurking beneath London's surface. Holmes, I said, this case has been a revelation, even for one accustomed to your methods. The audacity of it, the sheer imagination, makes me wonder how many such schemes go undetected. Holmes's eyes gleamed with that peculiar intensity which I knew signaled a mind still engaged with the chase. The world is full of such schemes, Watson, said he, rising to pace the room. London is a labyrinth of human ambition, greed, and folly, and for every plot we uncover, a dozen more lie in shadow. The Red-Headed League was but one thread in a vast tapestry of crime, its brilliance lying in its simplicity and its appeal to human nature. Clay understood that a man like Wilson could be swayed by flattery and profit, just as he knew the bank's gold would be a prize worth any risk. He paused by the window, gazing out at the bustling street below, where cabs rattled and pedestrians hurried through the morning's commerce. Our task, Watson, is to remain vigilant, to watch for the threads that others overlook. The Red-Headed League is dissolved, its architect in chains, but there will always be another lure, another scheme to tempt the unwary. That is the game we play, and I confess I find it endlessly diverting. I smiled, warmed by his enthusiasm, though a chill lingered at the thought of the unseen dangers he described. And you, Holmes, will you rest now, or is another puzzle already calling? He turned, his smile enigmatic. Rest is for those with less to occupy their minds, Watson. I have a monograph to complete on the influence of soil types on criminal footprints, and a curious letter arrived this morning from a certain Lady Brackwell, hinting at a matter of missing jewels. The game, as ever, is afoot. As he spoke, Mrs. Hudson entered with a fresh pot of coffee, her expression one of resigned amusement at our irregular hours. I thanked her, my thoughts lingering on the extraordinary mind of Sherlock Holmes, whose genius had once again pierced the veil of deception to reveal the truth. The Red-Headed League was no more, its final thread unraveled, but I knew that for Holmes, the world would never lack for mysteries, nor he for the will to solve them. And so, with the sun climbing higher and the day unfolding before us, we sat in the quiet of Baker Street, ready for whatever challenge might next cross our threshold. The end.